Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Good to have you with us on the program today. We got a lot of stuff to get to. Connor Riley from Athens, where Georgia fall camp is ongoing. He'll give us the latest there on that. I'm going to do something that you would maybe not expect me to do. I'm actually going to give Georgia a little bit of bulletin board material today. And I mean this sincerely, but I'm not necessarily doing it in a malicious, vindictive way. But I'll explain this in a moment. You can kind of judge for yourself and all of that. Obviously, Georgia got some good news, not unexpected, of course. Nation's #1 team in the officially released coaches poll that came out yesterday. We'll talk a little bit about that. Also, I think there's a very interesting dynamic happening in the SEC here right now, where it seems like Alabama seems pretty intent on copying a page from Georgia's book at the same time in which Georgia might be somewhat evolving as a program. In fact, I think that's interesting enough. I want to start there today on the show and give you the information we have on this. What do you say we do that first up off the top here? It is DawgNation Daily. It's the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Dial 678-ESOG now for a solution to your foundation and waterproofing problems.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So coming up in a couple of minutes, I'm going to do something that I perhaps don't typically do, which is I'm going to give Georgia some bulletin board material. It seems like lately a lot of folks are giving UGA bulletin board material. We had Colin Cowherd on the show yesterday. We've had all kinds of ESPN talking heads, things like that. There has been some bulletin board material out there coming in the direction of Georgia doubting from the upcoming season, touting someone else, whatever else. So that seems like it's a very fashionable, in vogue thing to do. So I'm going to take my turn to do some of that here in just a little bit there as well. Now, I mean this sincerely, but not maliciously, if you get my point. I'm not intentionally trying to troll them or troll you or anything else. I just want to point out what I do believe is a real concern. And I don't mean real in terms of, oh gosh, this is going to be terrible. I mean, it's a real concern from the standpoint that it actually truly really exists. And it is a legitimate question worth answering for the upcoming year. When I say real concern, that's what I mean. Not, oh, this is a real concern, the way that your parents would have said to you when you were growing up when you did something wrong. No, I mean real from the standpoint of I don't think this is fake. I don't think this is contrived. I do think this is genuine enough that it's probably worth us having a conversation over. So we'll do that here coming up in just a little bit. Prior to that, the interesting dynamic that played out for Georgia for a while, and you know this, was the attempt to get to the level of Alabama and finally take down the Crimson Tide. We kind of understand this in life, right? If you grew up playing video games, it's like there's always the boss at the end of the level, right? You're trying to get to Bowser's Castle. You're trying to do all of it, whatever that is. You're trying to beat the bad guy. That's just kind of the story we tell ourselves. There's always some sort of adversity, some sort of nemesis standing in the way, and along the way towards achieving goals and doing stuff like that, you're trying to get to that level and finally try to knock off that big bad boss that sort of stood in your way in the past. And for Georgia for quite some time, that was Alabama. That's one of the things that made the 2021 season so special, is because that national championship win came against the Alabama Crimson Tide. Georgia fans still have good memories of that, even though Georgia went on to win the national championship again in 2022. There's still that element of what happened in 2021 in Indianapolis was so sweet because of who it was that you beat to get there. It was a team that you legitimately struggled against, and a lot of folks, fans, media types, whatever else, had kind of held that over your head as Georgia tried to rise up. And in retrospect, it's miraculously quick how rapid Kirby Smart built Georgia to a national championship program. But until they got over the hump on that, Nick Saban, Alabama, was sort of held up as the standard bearer and also kind of used as a cudgel against Georgia to say, you may think you're hot, you may think you're something, but you're not Alabama yet. Well, we know that Georgia eventually toppled the Crimson Tide, and we know that last year when Georgia won the national championship again, Alabama was nowhere to be found. They lost twice in the regular season, and we're kind of on hold right now with the upcoming season pending and upcoming to determine, has Alabama sort of slipped off its perch, and are they no longer a relevant measuring stick for UGA? We simply don't know yet. Last year's result would suggest that might be taking place. We're waiting for further information this year to decide once and for all. So while that's, I guess, a conversation yet to be completed. There is, I believe, some evidence coming out of Tuscaloosa here that there's a certain degree of desperation trying to figure out what the vibe or the identity or, the DNA, the personality of Alabama is going to be in this kind of new world it lives in, which is, for right now, and this is not a dispute, for right now, Georgia is the top dog in college football. They've won the last 2 national championships. That is no longer Alabama. There are a lot of Alabama players who came to Alabama because of the prestige of, hey, we're the unquestioned top program in college football. Well, now that's not even true. It's not even a question. Georgia's the top program in college football, and Alabama is in the position now of trying to get back there or trying to get to that level to try to sort of reclaim something that it has lost over the course of the last couple of years. And I do think you see some evidence of a little bit of desperation in the Crimson Tide in terms of exactly what they need to do to kind of get to that point. I think you see some of that here right now. In fact, what I think you see is an Alabama program that was quite content for quite a long time to kind of sort of cast a new vision for college football, one in which the passing game and quarterbacks throwing to wide receivers and trying to score 50, 60 points a game if you could, that was the hallmark that sort of made Alabama, a far cry from the old days of Nick Saban. You've heard me talk about this plenty of times. A far cry from the old days of Nick Saban. The new version of Alabama kind of became, hey, we're going to have a number 1 overall draft pick like Bryce Young, or a first-round pick like Mac Jones or Tua Tagovailoa. We're going to try to score as many points as we can, and we're not going to maybe be quite as physical as we used to be, but we're going to be a lot more explosive. And it sort of seemed like that worked a little bit, certainly in a pandemic year when very few teams were playing a high level of defense. Defenses weren't able to practice together nearly as much as they normally would. Obviously, that worked really well. And in terms of regular season success in 2018, if for the most part 2019, you sort of saw that. National championship success hasn't quite worked out so well. In fact, Bryce Young finished his career as an Alabama starting quarterback without having won a national championship. And so all of a sudden, Alabama kind of left to go back to the drawing board to say, are we sure our blueprint still works? This thing that we committed ourselves to, scored as many points we can, first-round draft pick quarterbacks throwing to, in some cases, Heisman Trophy winning wide receivers. Are we sure this is what we need to do here right now? And there's some evidence to suggest coming out of Tuscaloosa that perhaps they're looking to their east and they see what Georgia has done in Athens the last couple of years. And perhaps there's this thought around Tuscaloosa of, you know what? Maybe we need to be a little bit more like Georgia. Hey, maybe some of the stuff that Georgia's been doing these last couple of years, the toughness, the physicality, the commitment to lines of scrimmage, all that kind of stuff, maybe we need to kind of get back to that at Alabama. I thought it was very interesting to hear Tyler Booker, who I think of as a terrific offensive lineman. And the honest truth here is I like kind of, jabbing at Alabama when I can, here and there. But the honest truth is I do think Alabama has a really good offensive line here this year. They may be, behind, Georgia, perhaps this Michigan team we keep hearing a whole lot about. The Alabama offensive line may be right there in that conversation, one of the overall strengths of this team. So while I'll kind of joke and be sarcastic about a lot of things related to the Crimson Tide, I won't do that about the Alabama offensive line. I do think that's probably a pretty good group. And Tyler Booker, one of the members of that group, was talking to the media here. And boy, easy to listen in on what Booker says here, and easy to kind of get the notion that Alabama has seen what has worked for Georgia, and it seems like after a whole lot of years where they were fairly committed to a finesse version of football, Alabama seems to be kind of going back the other direction now of maybe we ought to be a little bit more like what has worked for Georgia these last couple of years. Listen to an Alabama offensive lineman named Tyler Booker and judge for yourself if that's true. Take a listen to this.
We want to make people quit this year, and there's no better way to do that rather than to run the ball. So we're going to run the ball this year. We're going to pass the ball as well because we have a lot of talented guys at receiver. We have a lot of guys that can throw the ball very well. So just having that run-first mentality as an offensive line, that just gets us going because we want to make people quit.
How many times on this show have I played the clip for you? I'm not going to play it again now because I've played it so much in the past of Nick Saban saying, you're not going to win anything that way. Running the ball, playing defense, the kinds of things that Alabama used to be all about, that Nick Saban used to be all about prior to coming to Alabama as well. That's kind of the thing that made Saban. But at one point in time, he's strutting around, showing that an old dog can learn new tricks, and he was saying, you're not going to win anything that way. Well, it seems like Alabama may be actually reverting back here if you take Tyler Booker at face value, saying we want to make people quit. We want to be tougher. We want to be more physical at the point of attack, at the line of scrimmage. We want to be kind of a run-first team, he says. Now, maybe that's just Booker as an offensive lineman casting that wish for the rest of his offense, but we've also heard some rumblings and grumblings coming out of Tuscaloosa that Booker may not be the only one who believes that. After all, there is no Bryce Young walking through that door. The Alabama quarterback competition right now would appear to be between a guy, Tyler Buckner, that was at Notre Dame, who would have likely been the third-string quarterback for the Fighting Irish, Jalen Milroe, who we saw last year, averages grits, and Ty Simpson, who thus far has shown no evidence of living up to anywhere near the accolades he had coming in as a recruit. So some of this pivot on the part of Alabama might be out of necessity because they don't have what has made Alabama Alabama. In the past, it's been, well, if our wide receivers hadn't been hurt, we could have done whatever else. All of a sudden now, that level of receiver, healthy or not, just does not seem to exist on this Alabama program, we don't think. And they certainly don't have a quarterback the caliber of a Bryce Young to throw to them. So all of a sudden now they're like, hey, maybe we ought to go back to run the ball again. Being physically tough has certainly seemed to help Georgia. Maybe we ought to try to do some of that again. Can we just sort of pivot back in that direction? Now, the problem is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. And when you want to kind of instill toughness into your team, that is not an instantaneous decision that you make. And anyone who's ever tried to find a little more toughness and grit in their own life can tell you that it's not one of those things that you put on like a brand new suit. You just don't get to flip a switch and magically be tough after embracing a fairly large degree of finesse football now for a good number of years. So we'll see if that works out for Alabama. Frankly, that's their problem to solve. But what's ironic is, and make sure you hear what I'm saying here and don't hear what I'm not saying. What's ironic is, as Alabama seems to be pivoting back in the direction of Georgia, a team that has used physical toughness at the line of scrimmage in particular as a way of winning the last two national championships, there is some evidence that the Georgia situation might be evolving here a little bit too. I'm going to tell you this right now, and I don't have time to play all this for you. I think you need to go to the DawgNation YouTube page. I think you need to watch, if you can, you have time, and I hope you will make time for this, the full interviews that both Ladd McConkey and Arian Smith gave near the end of last week as they kind of talked about their overall mindset around Georgia football here right now. Y'all, I am over the moon excited about what the Georgia wide receiving core can be. Now, I'm not telling you here that all of a sudden that Georgia's going to try to be what Alabama was, because frankly, that didn't work out for Alabama as well as they think it did. It just didn't. The results speak for themselves there on that. They were never as successful becoming a finesse football team as I believe they think they were. The end-of-year results of the last 5 years sort of speak to that compared to any previous 5-year period during the Nick Saban era at Alabama. So I'm not telling you that Georgia's about to be Alabama and kind of be a wide receiver-led team, because that doesn't really lead you to national championships as much as they sort of think that it does, or maybe even think that it did. I think they have a little bit of a revisionist history about some of that. But I do believe this Georgia team this year is going to have wide receivers contribute to the overall team culture in a way that we just don't typically see around these dogs too much. I really like this group, not just because of what I think they can do on the field, probably the best crop of experienced, productive talent to begin a season I believe that Georgia's probably ever had, but I like the way in which they're kind of contributing to the overall story here around Georgia too. In other words, these are really good Georgia wide receivers, but they are, if you get my drift, Georgia wide receivers. They are wide receivers that play football like Georgia does. They are wide receivers who are not going to just be glitz and glamour and pizzazz and razzle dazzle and all that other kind of stuff. They're going to be Georgia players who bring a level of toughness to the wide receiver position. I mean this both mentally and physically. I want to highlight one guy in particular here, and that's Arian Smith. Now, y'all know the story on Arian Smith. This is a guy who, I mean, if you want to make a bet on a player that's probably not getting a lot of national attention right now, who could be a household name by the end of the year, I believe Arian Smith might be a pretty good bet for you in that direction. But he's also one of those guys that the reason why he doesn't get a ton of national attention because he has been hurt. He has been, kind of fighting to be on a football field for a full season. And he'll be the first to acknowledge that's a fight that's still ongoing for him right now, that he actually hasn't done it yet, but he's really committed to doing so. But in talking about all of that, I think he also kind of helped speak to one of the larger challenges for Georgia this year from maybe a perception and a team chemistry standpoint of how do you stay motivated? How do you stay focused to go for 3-23? How do you bring home another national championship knowing that all this team has done the last couple of years is collect trophies and collect accolades? And it's Arian Smith in particular in his own personal story here that may generate as much of that as anyone's capable of for Georgia here right now. So it's just sort of weirdly ironic here at a time in which Alabama seems to be pivoting away from wide receivers. Georgia seems to be making wide receivers a larger part of the overall success formula for this team here this year. I think it's interesting. If you don't believe me, listen to Arian Smith, I think, casting a really appropriate vision for how Georgia stays motivated for the upcoming year. Arian using his own backstory as a way of doing that. Take a listen to this.
You can't set a goal that far ahead. We try to stay what's important now, because we can't win no national championship right now. We gotta still practice and build a foundation for the season, throughout fall camp, to get to where we want to be.
As a guy who's had to overcome so many injuries, how has the process of doing that helped you become better and be the player and person that you're trying to be going forward into this season?
Hunger. I'm hungry. I still ain't played, even though what I did in the past don't mean nothing to me right now. I'm still trying to get ready for this season, and show what I can do this season. What I did last year don't really mean nothing. So just the hunger, I'll say, because I haven't played much.
You love that word, hungry. Georgia has a wide receiver named Arian Smith, who's a former elite recruit, who's a blazing, track star, who may be a very attractive NFL draft pick at some point in time. But he's not, if you'll pardon this phrase, the stereotypical wide receiver. No, he's hungry. He's a Georgia wide receiver that has the Georgia mindset at the wide receiver position. He's hungry. I think that's really cool, because at a time in which Alabama is trying to pivot back and be more like Georgia, find that toughness along the lines of scrimmage that maybe it's been lacking the last couple of years, Georgia may be saying, we've still got the toughness, but now we've got the wide receivers too. All of a sudden, Georgia's taking the edge that it's had in college football the last couple of years and perhaps saying, and now we're adding to that healthy wide receivers like Arian Smith who bring the hunger to show what they're capable of doing for a full season. This is a really fun time to be a Georgia fan. The typical contenders for college football supremacy, they are in a tough spot right now. They are forced to answer, how do we match what Georgia's doing? Alabama's making its desperate attempt to do that, but as Alabama's working to get where Georgia is, Georgia's working to go where it's never been before. Let me tell you, that is a very good thing. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Hello to you, and thank you for being with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Of course, we start earlier than that on the DawgNation homepage, the DawgNation app, 9:45 for our 1st and 15. Of course, every other platform there as well, podcast or radio, everything else. We're just happy to have you with us for that. And a big thanks to our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia who make it all possible. And not only is ESOG a good friend of ours, they're also proud partners of UGA there as well. So I can tell you, and I'm sure George would say the same thing, but I can tell you, I sincerely appreciate your support of Engineered Solutions of Georgia, because the degree to which they've supported us there as well. Great partnerships, what it makes a business thrive. And DawgNation Daily, of course, is a business. We exist to kind of connect you with companies that we think can do good work by you. And we believe that is true for Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Absolutely, that's the case. If you find yourself dealing with a foundation or a waterproofing issue, we know they do good work for you, because we have seen evidence of that from the people in our audience who have been served by Engineered Solutions of Georgia there as well. People who recognize the signs of a problem. Water creeping in where it's not supposed to be, basement, crawl space, garage, things like that. Cracks. Any kind of sheetrock crack or, cracks in the brick on the outside of the house, things like that. That can be a sign of something. But the good news is it may not be a sign of anything all that serious. I mean, sometimes, I'm an idiot, so everything looks serious to me, but Engineered Solutions of Georgia got an entire team of engineers on staff. They're the only people in our marketplace that have that level of resource ready to sort of go to work for you if need be, so they can tell you what I can't. Well, this crack is a big deal, but that one's not. This water intrusion is the sort of sign of a larger problem. This is more one of those things where a little bit of caulk or whatever else, get it all taken care of. I mean, whatever the thing is, they can just sort of tell you that. But if it's a more substantial problem than the simple fix can solve, all the more reason to have, as I said before, the unparalleled resources that Engineered Solutions of Georgia can provide for you. So I want you to reach out and give them a call. Very easy number to remember, 678-ESOG-NOW. That's 678-ESOG-NOW. And keep in mind, Engineered Solutions of Georgia also offers you a fully transferable triple protection warranty on materials, installation, and design. So they're going to give you great peace of mind for the work they're doing for you, and I want you to reach out to them. Proud partners of UGA, long-time, loyal friends of ours here on DawgNation Daily. We just really appreciate Engineered Solutions of Georgia, not just what they do for us, but what we know they can do for you. All right. In a couple of minutes, we'll announce the latest of our Kroger Celebrating Teachers Award winners. That's going to be a lot of fun. We'll get Connor Riley here coming up in a minute there as well. But prior to that, I want to go around the DawgHouse. And today, I want to give Georgia a little bit of bulletin board material. And listen, I say that kind of half kiddingly, but the topic itself, I think, I mean this seriously, because in kind of looking at some of the stuff that Kirby Smart said when he kind of kicked off fall camp last week and kind of looking at some big picture stuff around UGA, I do think there is a real question that Georgia needs to answer. And I do think allowing them to go out in the field and prove this is probably an appropriate thing to be able to do. In other words, I like kind of defending Georgia when idiots are talking up Michigan or idiots are talking up Ohio State or, whatever else kind of gets chatter this time of year. I like defending Georgia and all that kind of stuff. But in this conversation among Georgia fans, I think it's sort of fair for us to say, hey, Georgia probably does have one or two things to prove in terms of how this 2023 team is going to function compared to the last two national championship teams. And even if we think the answer will eventually be a positive and affirmative one, we still sort of need to see it. And I think one area in which that's true is the transition at offensive coordinator from Todd Monken now to Mike Bobo. And I would say, generally speaking, I have been more pro Bobo than some of you have been. Mike Bobo has always been kind of a lightning rod for conversation, things like that. And I think the actual track record of Bobo is probably better than sometimes some of y'all have wanted to give it credit for. Reasonable people can disagree, and this is what we do. We argue about college football even amongst ourselves here sometimes. And there's no more, I guess, controversial position on any football team typically than the offensive play caller. So all of this is just sort of paint by numbers, the way that football conversations go. If you've ever listened to any kind of form of sports talk, you've certainly seen that. But I think that overall, Bobo's got the evidence on his side more so than some of you want to give him credit for. But that does not mean he doesn't have big shoes to fill stepping in for Todd Monken here this year. And that doesn't mean that there won't be a standard that Bobo will need to be held to as Georgia offensive coordinator. And as a way of kind of, I guess, sort of getting this conversation going here, let's go back in time to last week. Kirby Smart asked about the transition from Todd Monken to Mike Bobo and kind of what all of that is about, and from Smart's perspective, why he thinks that Georgia is sort of well-positioned to make this transition for reasons that go beyond just Bobo's abilities. Let me let you hear a little bit of Kirby Smart on that from last week.
I think anytime you lose a coordinator, you could rank it up there with like, okay, is that equal to an assistant coach? Probably not. I mean, you would think losing a coordinator is greater than others. I think retaining the rest of the offensive staff, and I think Ty would be the first to tell you, once I knew he was leaving and I sat down and had a long meeting with him, he re-emphasized how good this staff was at doing their job of presenting him ideas. I think a lot of people look at offensive coordinator as an island, and this guy just sits over there and comes up with this stuff himself. Well, they have 15, 20 meetings a week on Monday, Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, where each coach gives a presentation of ideas or things they can do offensively, and he gets to sit back and be the decision maker on what's in and what's not. And those ideas really helped him, and he was quick to say, Coach, you're going to be fine no matter who you put in that position.
So that's Kirby Smart on that particular topic. It's a fine answer. I think most Georgia fans probably agree with it, but here's where the bulletin board material part comes in. Honesty compels me to admit that Smart has said things similar to this in the past, and he was wrong. And I think you need to keep in mind that as you move into this year in terms of the fact that Todd Monken's level of achievement as Georgia offensive coordinator is just so much higher than anything Georgia had offensively since Kirby Smart has been here. And I want to go back in time to when Jim Chaney, who was not necessarily every Georgia fan's cup of tea himself, but when he left after the 2018 season and James Coley was on his way in, some of the same stuff that Smart was just saying there, the idea of, hey, coordinator's only one of the offensive coaches, and the entire offensive coaching staff works together as a group to kind of function and create an offense that flows well on game day, what Smart just said there. But the transition away from Monken to Mike Bobo, Kirby Smart also said the same thing in 2019 when this team was transitioning to James Coley as his offensive coordinator. If you don't believe me, let me read this. Now, I'm not going to put this on the screen. I'm just going to read this off the internet. But Smart back in 2019 said, I think anytime you build the infrastructure in a program, when people leave, as long as you're not changing that infrastructure, it doesn't create a lot of doubt or anxiety in the players. Doesn't that sound a lot like Kirby Smart saying, hey, our coaching staff remains in place. Monken may be gone, but our infrastructure is still here. Very similar phrasing. Smart back in 2019 went on to say, certainly from my perspective, very comfortable after being in our system for 3 years that we've got really good coordinators. James Coley, our new offensive coordinator, has been with us a long time. I've known James from graduate assistant days back at LSU. I've got tremendous respect for him. I know the offenses he's worked with in the past, and he's also been a part of ours. He's been a very integral part of that offense. So there's not going to be a lot of change. It'll be more about what our players can do than what our coaches can do. And it's that last phrase that you're going to hear from Kirby Smart kind of coming up again here in a moment, the idea of, hey, our coaching system is in place. We've got the infrastructure. We've got guys who've been here, but it's about the execution. It's about the performance. In fact, let me let you hear a little bit more from Kirby Smart from last week and see if you don't think this sounds an awful lot like what Smart said before Georgia kind of went to work with James Coley as offensive coordinator in 2019. Take a listen and judge for yourself here on this.
You're going to oversee it, make sure they do it right as the leader, and then they're going to do a good job because they have pride in their performance as assistant coaches on offense, and then whoever you put in that position is going to have good players and be able to be successful. So we were very fortunate to have Todd the time he was here, the growth he allowed us to make, the confidence he exuded with the players, and he had a package of offense that he felt confident in that fit the players that he was given. He made the personnel fit his scheme, and I don't see that changing. You know, obviously the quarterback is a major part of that, and we had really good quarterback play last year. So a lot of times your offense is predicated off your quarterback play. So how well will our quarterback play, and that's the question.
So Smart says, hey, a lot of this is going to be predicated about how the quarterback performs in the offensive system, similar to what he said there in 2019, more about what the players do than what our coaches do. But I think we have enough evidence around college football to suggest, I'm not quite so sure that's exactly true necessarily, that great systems can make average quarterbacks play very well. In much the same fashion, an average system can make a great quarterback talent not look all that impressive. Look at, all kinds of quarterbacks around, college football. You can sort of see, I think, some evidence and examples of that if a great talented quarterback is hampered by a less than stellar system, all of a sudden that great quarterback doesn't look exactly the same way there. So let me make sure I'm very clear about what I'm saying here, is that I do believe that Monken-Bobo can be a sensational offensive coordinator for Georgia. In fact, I think he was a very good offensive coordinator his first tour of duty here before becoming a head coach at Colorado State. But I also believe that Todd Monken cast a very, very big shadow over this program here right now. James Coley, the guy in 2019 we were just talking about a moment ago, Georgia in SEC games that particular season only averaged about 21 points per game. They blew out, Arkansas State and Georgia Tech and Murray State. They put up big numbers in 2019 against less than stellar SEC-level competition, but against SEC-level competition, this team had a hard time scoring points. It's why Coley only lasted 1 year, and it's why Todd Monken was brought in. A little bit of a departure from the system, I believe, that Georgia had been running prior to that. And the results from Monken spoke for themselves almost from the very moment he took the Georgia job. Certainly in the last 2 national championship seasons, Todd Monken put big-time fingerprints on both those championship trophies. So I guess this is my version of bulletin board material. On the list of things that Georgia has to prove this year, I think it does need to prove that it can win without Todd Monken. And I do think it needs to prove that it can function offensively as well this season as it did when Monken was here. Do I think that Georgia can do that and likely will do that? Yeah, I think the answer to that question is yes. I do believe, as I mentioned off the top of the show, this is likely to be a sensational Georgia offense. But just because I'm optimistic about what they can do doesn't make the question any less significant. Todd Monken was a big part of what Georgia did the last 2 years, and being just as good without him offensively is going to be a major part of the story here in 2023. We'll make that around the DawgHouse here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia Today. And, of course, before we move on and talk to Connor Riley, I also want to go ahead and give out some congratulations, I should say, to our latest Kroger Celebrating Outstanding Teachers winner. We're going to announce one of these winners each and every day this week. And our winner today is Christina Hood, who was nominated by, Josh Hood is the winner, nominated by his wife, Christina Hood. So Josh Hood is our winner. Christina Hood, Josh's wife, is the nominator here. So congratulations to, So Josh Hood nominated his wife, Christina Hood. So I've read this wrong. I apologize. Christina Hood is the winner. Josh Hood was the nominator here. After 4 tries, finally get that right. So Christina Hood's a 4th grade teacher at East Fannin Elementary School in Fannin County, Georgia, way up there in the beautiful North Georgia mountains. Works harder than anyone I've ever seen to be a great teacher and mentor to her students. She works long, unpaid hours at home to be ready for the class. She cares about her students and wants the best for them. She's a great mom and wife too. So that's one of the things I know, having, grown up around teachers and, been around the school system for a long time, is, great teachers, so often they are working those sort of, as Josh says here, unpaid hours, doing those things and really doing what oftentimes can be kind of a thankless task, right? To make the school year one great for the students who they are in charge of. And it sounds like Christina's one of those great teachers, so we really appreciate that from Christina. Congratulations on being an outstanding teacher, courtesy of Kroger. And Josh Hood, thank you for being a nominator here. Josh is going to get a prize for making that nomination. Christina gets the great collection of gift cards, courtesy of our friends at Kroger. So that is all just a really incredible thing. And congratulations to the Hoods there on all of that. All right, before we are done on the program here today, we're going to get a chance to look at Georgia number 1 overall in the recently released coaches poll. We've had a lot of unofficial, way too early type polls, but now we sort of reached the time of year in which the official polls are coming out, and Georgia number 1 there on that. But for now, on everything as it relates to Georgia football, including the ongoing fall camp taking place there in Athens and everything else, let's get ready to dive into all of that. I'm going to tap dance here for a minute because we don't have Connor ready to go. But Connor Riley here coming up. We'll not only get into what's going down with UGA and its fall camp, we're also expected to hear from, speaking of Georgia assistant coaches, Georgia coaches here over the course of the next few days. So Connor will help us preview all of that. And we're going to get the latest on Georgia recruiting, too, after kind of a wild roller coaster of a weekend in terms of a commitment that Georgia did get, and by now you know a commitment that Georgia didn't get. So all of that on the way here. Let's roll on here. DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Good to have you with us here today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello, Connor Riley here, DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. So, Connor, we talk a little bit about some of the stuff ongoing with Georgia fall camp as it kind of rolls on here. And I was just talking a moment ago, listen, I'm obviously a Georgia fan. I am obviously someone who's seen the great success that Georgia's had the last couple of years, and I do believe they're going to win the national championship again here this year, too. But as you're kind of watching some of this, and I know you got a chance to see some of practice last week, and you're going to kind of hear from these Georgia coaches and players over the course of the next few days there as well, no matter how good you think Georgia is, and no matter how likely you might think another championship in 2023 is there as well, that doesn't mean that there aren't some questions to be answered by Georgia here this year. And I kind of half-kiddingly, half-seriously sort of talked about one of those a moment ago, which I do think that Todd Monken leaves a huge shadow over this program. I just think he was an outstanding offensive coordinator, far better than anything that Georgia had under Kirby Smart prior to him getting here. And while I think that Bobo is likely a very capable replacement, I think that Monken sets a very high bar here. And I don't know if there are many more significant preseason storylines for UGA other than that. Can they go out, especially in the biggest games, and have the kind of offensive success without Todd Monken that they had with him? To me, that may rank as much as anything in terms of the importance scale for Georgia here this year.
Right, and Kirby has said, we're going to keep this offense as much of it similar as, as it was a season ago under Todd Monken with Mike Bobo coming in, and that's good and fine and all. But, play design and getting players in space and game planning is really only half the battle. There is something to be said about calling a game and making adjustments on the fly and tweaking what you want to do before and after halftime, and Mike Bobo is going to have to show that he can go out there and do that as well as Todd Monken did. I think you and I have both been on a similar boat when it comes to Mike Bobo in terms of his ability as a Georgia offensive coordinator and the job we think he can do. But it's one thing to think that, and it's another to go out there and actually do it and do it as well as Todd Monken did for Georgia. Again, this is a Georgia offense that in the 3 years that he was the offensive coordinator, Georgia never had a 1,000-yard rusher, and it just never seemed to matter. Georgia always got the most out of its skill players. I think that was the biggest thing. And look, Brock Bowers is one of the best players in the country, and I think Todd Monken's ability as a play caller and as a guy that could get the ball to Bowers in specific situations is a big part of that. I'm really interested in seeing how Monken-Bobo goes out and uses Bowers this season because, while yes, Monken-Bobo got good production out of tight ends in the past, Brock Bowers is a different beast, and you've got to find a way to feed him and put him in space and take advantage of what he is able to do. Brock Bowers is not just another piece of the offense. He is, in some ways, the offense. And so I'll be interested in seeing how Bobo gets the most out of him, how he gets the most out of a guy like Ladd McConkey, who is so much more than just a slot receiver. He's a guy who can do a lot of different things for you. There's a lot of talent on this offense, and I think you're right to point out that while, yes, there can be belief in what Bobo can do with this offense, there are still, I think it's very fair to ask questions about what this is ultimately going to look like.
Speaking of Bowers, I thought it was really fun to see him on the Biletnikoff Award watch list, which is obviously an unofficial designation. Every receiver in America, every pass catcher, I guess, is eligible for the award. The watch list doesn't really mean very much. Most of our audience kind of understands that and knows that. But you'll talk about something fun, just kind of the evolution of him as a player to the point in which, that's even the consideration here. And I think that, honestly, I think I might rather have him win the Biletnikoff than the Heisman. I think it'd just be one of those things that would just be so fun for UGA. And I don't know if this is like, in like movies, Connor, you have to sort of nominate yourself or submit yourself as either a candidate for, like, say, the supporting actor award or the best actor award, and you kind of make the choice that you want to make. I don't know that Georgia needs to kind of like, for your consideration, Brock Bowers for the Biletnikoff Award, but there's an element to which I'd rather him win the Biletnikoff Award than almost anything happen this year, just because of how, cool and deserving I think that would be. So it's nice to see, and the last few weeks I think have been an example of this. It is really nice for me to see Bowers finally start to get the attention that I believe that he deserves, and I guess this Biletnikoff deal here, along with the Mackey, by the way. And at this point in time, I'm honestly done with the Mackey because they didn't even nominate him as a finalist in 2021. So at this point, I don't want to see him win the Mackey again. I want to see him win the Biletnikoff, and I don't know that anyone's ever won, both those awards or whatever else. It's just kind of a fun conversation to be a part of.
Yeah, it's sort of like, Ryan Gosling in his performance in Barbie. Is he going to be, lead actor or supporting actor? Because if he's supporting actor, we can go ahead and hand him the Oscar. And so I think with Brock, look, I don't think it's out of the question for him to possibly end up in New York if he leads Georgia in receiving again. He's the best player on the best team in the country, which if Georgia's number one at the end of the regular season and they win the SEC championship, he's probably going to be. There have been players invited to New York, I think, with lesser career credentials and lesser, things that they've accomplished than Brock. And if he leads Georgia in receiving again, and Georgia's number one heading into the college football playoff, he's a guy that I certainly think not just can, win the Biletnikoff, but be recognized at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. Now, can he win it? That is a totally different thing to consider, Devontae Smith did win it in the 2020 season, but again, the numbers he put up that season are ridiculous, and we know Georgia's not going to run their offense through Brock the way I think Alabama did with Devontae in that season. And so it'll be tough for him to ultimately win the Heisman, which I think you're sort of right to point out there. But Marvin Harrison is a fantastic player at Ohio State. Washington has some very talented wide receivers out there in the Pac-12, but pound for pound, if he's used properly and really maximized in the way that I think he can be, I don't know that there's a better pass catcher in the country than Brock Bowers. Again, you go back to his last game against TCU, 10 catches, 152 yards, and he did all that with playing essentially one drive into the third quarter. So, when Georgia wants to use him and fully unleash him, it's hard to stop him, and he's an incredibly fun player to watch, and I think if he's able to get through the season healthy, obviously, and do what he continues to do, he could be racking up plenty of hardware, both the Mackey Award, which you don't much care for, and the Biletnikoff Award, which I think it would be really interesting to see a tight end ultimately win that.
Connor, I thought that Ladd McConkey and Arian Smith both had outstanding interviews last week, and I hope our audience will go find those on the DawgNation YouTube page. I just thought they were really very good. And to me, it sort of speaks to kind of an interesting maybe transition for Georgia offensively right now. And as I said off the top of our program, I do not believe that Georgia's going to become a wide receiver-led team because I don't think that'd be a very good thing for Georgia. But I do believe that Georgia's wide receivers are in a position of leadership right now in a way that I don't think we've seen them be under Kirby Smart. Now, individually, you've had guys like Kearis Jackson who are all-time great leaders, of course. I'm not talking about individuals necessarily here. I'm talking about the position group overall in terms of the way it sets the tone for the program. I thought the stuff from Ladd the other day was great. I thought that Arian Smith, talking about his hunger to kind of go out for a full season and show what he can be all about. I think this is kind of an interesting evolution for that position group, and perhaps it kind of comes at a time of need with, I think you and I both kind of on the same page, but a little bit of uncertainty right now for Georgia at running back. So the emergence of wide receivers perhaps coming at a good time here, but I believe it's coming no matter what. Really strong stuff, I thought, from both Arian and Ladd, two guys we heard from last week.
Yeah, there's a confidence in this wide receiver room that I don't think has been there in quite some time at Georgia, certainly under Kirby Smart. And I think a big part of that is just, again, Arian Smith, as it stands right now, is healthy. Ladd McConkey is feeling as good as he will going into a season there. Dominic Lovett continues to do great things by all accounts from what we've seen and heard coming out of practice. Marcus Rosemy-Jackson is a trusted senior receiver that you have. Dylan Bell, I'm telling you right now, I don't think he's going to be the fifth best receiver Georgia has over the course of the season. I think he's going to be closer to 2 or 3 by the time we get to the end of it in terms of what he is able to do there. And so it is not just a deep room. It is a bit of an older room where you have guys like Ladd, Arian, and Marcus all in their 4th seasons. You have guys who have been in this program for a while now. And again, I think you're right to point out, this isn't going to be a program that's ever run through its wide receivers in the way, Alabama or LSU in 2019 were. But there is a confidence that this group now has because, let's be honest, that these guys went out there and made some huge plays last year, especially in that Ohio State game. They don't win that game without Arian Smith making the plays that he did. Ladd McConkey was huge in games against LSU and in the national championship game against TCU. These guys have gone out and proven what they can do in big games, and I think they now know that and understand what needs to be done to get to that level, and they've taken that over into the offseason. They've had that confidence with them, and now are bringing it into the 2023 football season.
So to change the topic here for a moment, this is going to be a fun week because we get a chance to really, for one of the very rare times, hear from some Georgia assistant coaches, such as Glenn Schumann and others here. I kind of talked a moment ago about some questions around the Georgia offense, and so Monken-Bobo will certainly face some of that kind of stuff. But as you get a chance to talk to some of these assistant coaches in a time this week that you really don't get a chance to do again until you get to January, if all goes well for UGA, what do you think the big questions around some of these guys are right now?
Yeah, I think with Glenn Schumann, I think we're really going to be interested in hearing, why he elected to remain at Georgia. He was a guy who the Philadelphia Eagles made a big push for. Other programs have pushed to land before and try and pry him for Georgia. And again, this is a guy, he's been here as long as Kirby Smart has. Why has he sort of stuck around, and what is his ultimate future here? I think there are a lot of people interested in hearing what he has to say about that. And sure, we'll touch on the defensive line, the inside linebackers. We're not, I believe, going to end up hearing from Will Muschamp this week, so I think that'll curtail some of the secondary questions, at least when it comes to the defensive backs in the room. I believe this is the first time from a UGA's perspective that we get to hear from Todd Hartley. Now, we've talked to him at sort of those bowl game scenarios, but in terms of him standing at the lectern at the University of Georgia, it's the first time to hear from him. He is a joy to talk to. He's going to have a lot of interesting things to say. Obviously, he'll get asked about Brock a whole lot. But I think he's a guy that Georgia fans should be excited to hear from, given he is an alum. He is someone that cares deeply about this program and is, in my opinion, one of the best position coaches in the country, not just in terms of his ability to go out and recruit, but his ability to go out and develop and turn players into the best versions of themselves. And then later in the week, we'll hear from Monken-Bobo, who I think just in general has a lot of questions, and that's always the case when there's an offensive coordinator on top of the fact that there is a quarterback battle ongoing. And so to hear from him on that, I think, you can talk about Carson Beck, you can talk about Brock Vandagriff, you can talk about, as you point out, taking over for Todd Monken. I think when Bobo steps to speak up on Thursday, there are just a lot of different areas that Georgia's going to be able to go in that and have a lot of questions that, quite frankly, not all are going to be answered on that first day. We're going to have to see some things over the course of the season. But, for a reporter who doesn't get to talk to these guys till the end of December, till after Christmas, really, it's a big week, and we're going to try and get as many questions as we can and hopefully get some answers as far as how things are looking, not just for the 2023 season, but how the Georgia football program operates as a whole.
I want to do one final thing before we let you go. Obviously, Georgia got some good news with Nate Frazier. We've had a chance to talk about that a good bit, but it seems like the lingering story is what happened with K.J. Bolden choosing Florida State. I told our audience this yesterday. I'll repeat it here right now and kind of give you a chance to reply. I don't know ultimately how it all plays out with Bolden, but I am quite confident that Saturday night is not the last time we hear about Georgia and its involvement with KJ Bolden's recruitment. I just believe that Georgia's very unlikely to give up on all of this. You know, the notion that Georgia hosted him on 16 visits, that Kirby Smart took a lead in this recruitment, that suddenly Georgia's going to now wave the white flag just because of a non-binding decision on streaming video on a Saturday night. I just don't think that's the way this works at all. You know, obviously we kind of know what maybe tipped the scales in the balance of Florida State. I think that can be, you know, kind of a complicated subject moving forward in terms of now the Seminoles need to go ahead and make good on the promise they made. We'll see if they're able to do that, and we'll just kind of see what's next with Bolden here. Ultimately, he may very well end up at Florida State. Obviously, the commitment suggests that he might. Seminoles fans think that he will. I saw KJ yesterday. He gave the chop gesture when he was announced as a part of the Corky Kale Dave Hunter Classic luncheon that I was a part of. So I don't have any tangible reason to believe that Bolden won't go to Florida State, but I have a lot of, let's call it circumstantial reason to believe that Georgia's going to still be involved in the Bolden recruitment down to the wire here, and that, you know, Georgia Bolden in the same story before December. My guess is we read that a couple of times. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think Kirby's going to go John Rambo, and you know, nothing is over when it comes to recruiting until those guys officially sign. And if you look at the way things are shaping up with Georgia in this defensive back class, yeah, they feel great about with what they have at cornerback and Ellis Robinson, DeMello Jones there. But safety, you know, a few months ago where it looked like KJ was trending to Georgia, you had Peyton Woodyard firmly committed. You had Jalen Hayward. Hayward is already decommitted. It sounds like Woodyard may be on his way out as well. And so safety very quickly becomes a position where, again, you don't need to load up like Georgia had earlier in this cycle, given what you have. And guys like Malachi Starks, Janelle Aguero, it sounds like Justin Rhett is having a very good start to his Georgia career there. But you do need some guys in this class, and a potential difference maker like KJ Bolden being just down the road in Buford, having Dylan Raiola as a teammate there who, look, I know some people might not be happy right now with the fact that Bolden, a Buford prospect, chose to go play for Florida State. Georgia is going to continue to push and continue to try and be in this race for Bolden. Bolden ultimately ends up going to Florida State, which I think is certainly a possibility here. There are just some things that, you know, can be overcome. You just tip your cap and say there, but you know, to think that, oh, well, you know, Georgia's lost out on the KJ Bolden recruitment because he made a decision in August. You know, things can change, and you know, let's say there's a world where Florida State goes 7-5 this season and struggles and loses some of the momentum that they had coming out of the 2022 season. You know, maybe that forces Bolden to change things and look at things once again, because it's clear that Georgia can continue to win on a year-in, year-out basis. And for as much as Mike Norvell has done in terms of flipping that Florida State program, he's still only 18-16 in his time there at Florida State, and is not exactly in the same stratosphere that Kirby Smart is as a head coach.
Good stuff, Connor. We appreciate your time here today. We'll look forward to reading a lot from you there online at DawgNation.com as these Georgia assistant coaches meet with reporters. Practice rolls on. I thought your practice report last week was outstanding. Really fun nuggets on both Marvin Jones Jr., who I've been very high on, Dominic Lovett, who I've been similarly anticipating getting the chance to see. Really good stuff there. I've jokingly said that I would not be good at practice reports. Like I'm out there, 1,000 things happening at once, and you know it's not always easy for my ADHD to kind of keep up with some of that kind of stuff, but you do that really well. So when you write one, it is certainly worth reading, and we appreciate you putting that out there.
Yep, we'll have another one later today as we do get a chance to watch practice today, so looking forward to that.
Good stuff, Connor. We'll talk to you then.
Yep, as always, it was a pleasure.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, good stuff with Connor Riley there. And as I said before, you know, I think everybody's got talents. Hopefully I have one. But, you know, Connor clearly does, and that ability to kind of be out there at practice, observe what's going on, and then present that information in a digestible form, right? And so that's why we love practice report season, as it is, SZN. We like that in general, and we think that Connor does a really good job with that. So stay close to DawgNation.com, free of charge. Reading a terrific practice report from Connor Riley coming later on today here at DawgNation.com. Well worth your time. I believe that it is. Something else that's well worth your time as well, although admittedly not free of charge, is the DawgNation Cruise coming up in April of 2024. In fact, that's a great segue for us to cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean today. And by now you know we are bigger and better than we've ever been in the past for the April 2024 version of the DawgNation Cruise, because we're going to be on board one of those Oasis-class ships. It's called Allure of the Seas, and it's right now the largest class of ships currently at sea. And this April, you get a chance to experience the biggest and the best of all of it, April 22nd through the 26th. And what makes the Oasis-class ship so special is you have the various neighborhoods. There's like a Central Park neighborhood. It's literally like you're walking through almost like a downtown city park type thing with real growing foliage and restaurants and bars and things like that. It's like you're in a city somewhere, except you're on a ship floating on the sea, which is amazing. The boardwalk neighborhood kind of functions the same way. Obviously, the Royal Promenade, which is kind of something we've grown to love over the years there as well. But so many of those kinds of things on board Allure of the Seas is one of the reasons why you want to be there and be a part of it. As we leave out of Port Canaveral, going to Nassau in the Bahamas, going to Perfect Day Coco Cay, and doing even more tremendously themed DawgNation events we've ever done in the past. RoyalDogs.com, the website to go to find out about all of that. All right, let's talk Coaches Bowl here for a moment. Because as I said a little earlier in the show, we've kind of transitioned away from way too early top 25 or kind of unofficial hot list or whatever else that's, kind of being shared by people who sort of talk about this stuff for a living. Now we're getting down to the official stuff. And admittedly, I sort of like the AP poll better than the Coaches Poll. I think the AP poll probably has a little bit more long-term utility than the Coaches Poll does. But the Coaches Poll kind of always comes out first. It's always really fun. I believe we have some of this to show you here. So this coming from 24/7 Sports. They're just graphic. We stole it. The top 25, but they have credit on the screen, of course. The top 25 Coaches Poll here for this upcoming year. No surprise, you got Georgia at number 1. Then you go Michigan number 2, and the question you would ask is, how could mighty Michigan not be number 2, just given all the hype that they've gotten here as of late, including from Colin Cowherd yesterday. Alabama at 3, Ohio State at 4, then you get to LSU at 5. Let me park on the top 5 here for a moment and kind of dive in a little deeper on this. That Georgia got 61 first-place votes, as they probably should. Michigan did not actually get any first-place votes, despite having enough total voting points to get to number 2. Bama got 4 number 1 votes. Ohio State got 1. Admittedly, I don't know this. I think it's an interesting question. Like, how is this the fewest number 1 votes to go to a non-number 1 team? Only a total of 5 votes going to anyone else other than Georgia. I'm sure there have been years in which the disparity has been pretty close to that. But, not only is Georgia number 1, but it's number 1 by a just, monumental margin here, which is interesting because it does not reflect what the overall chatter has been. The overall chatter has been, Kirk Herbstreit in Alabama, Reese Davis in Michigan, national writers doing this and that about the Wolverines. But the actual voting, a little bit like the gambling odds, actually overwhelmingly favor Georgia. And this is a little bit of a snapshot like it was prior to Georgia, facing Tennessee, which is, Georgia was a very big point spread favorite in that game. And no matter how much was said about the Vols, that point spread did not really move very much in the direction of Tennessee prior to that kickoff. The folks that put their money where their mouth was, or in this case, the pollsters, putting their, money where the reputation is, clearly showing deference to the number 1 overall team, Georgia. But it's the sort of cheap and easy hot take that seems to kind of go in the direction of Ohio State or Alabama or Michigan. Just kind of an interesting kind of thing to keep in mind there. Now, there are a couple of sort of side-by-side comparisons, which I do think are pretty interesting. On the one hand, it seems like the coaches probably get it right, ranking Michigan ahead of Ohio State. If I'm going to say, which I've said many times before, of what has changed for Georgia and Michigan to make you think that Michigan has suddenly overtaken Georgia, we don't think there's a whole lot of tangible evidence to suggest that is going to happen. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but predicting to happen requires some sort of evidence, and we don't really see an overwhelming reason why Michigan has risen up and Georgia has diminished itself down, and that's why we're comfortable putting Georgia ahead of Michigan. But if you're going to say that about Georgia in comparison to Michigan, you are also fair to say that about Michigan for the positive in comparison to Ohio State. And it seems like the coaches probably get that right. You got Michigan at 2, Ohio State at 4. Michigan's beaten Ohio State the last 2 years. The onus is on Ohio State to prove they're better than Michigan, and until they do, ranking Michigan ahead of Ohio State just sort of seems like the right thing to do. So from that standpoint, the coaches who vote in this poll seem to have gotten it right. But if you're using that as your logic, there are a couple of other interesting sort of, curiosities here, right? How come Alabama's ranked ahead of LSU? And I mean this. Like, legitimately. I mean this, matter-of-factly. What has Alabama done? What does Alabama have that makes you think this year's result between these two teams will be better and different for the Crimson Tide than last year's result was? And you say, well, the game's in Tuscaloosa. Yes, it is. But is that enough to put Alabama ahead of LSU here right now? And it kind of furthers what has been for us another one of these ongoing conversations of, is LSU a media darling or are they overlooked? I think finally and once and for all, we can say that LSU, I believe, is undervalued by the market because they beat Alabama a year ago. Now, they didn't look very good in losing games like Tennessee, admittedly so. A little bit of a slop fest in the season opener against Florida State. But when it mattered, LSU was good against the very best team they would be measured against in the SEC West. We just simply think it's wrong to rank Alabama over LSU. Doesn't mean the Crimson Tide couldn't overtake the Tigers in the SEC West in the final year of that division. But right now, just on the basis of the sort of typical logic that ought to inform how you vote in polls like this, we believe LSU should be ranked ahead of Alabama. By the way, the same thing's true in the ACC there as well. How come Florida State's ranked ahead of Clemson? Now, you've heard a lot of Florida State hype here over the course of the last 48 hours, but you could be forgiven if, on the basis of that hype, you didn't realize Florida State actually hadn't beaten Clemson in like 7 years. And Florida State's, if you care about like blue chip ratio, which is the percentage of former 4- and 5-star players on a roster, Florida State's blue chip number is like 35%. And I know that Clemson wasn't very good offensively last year, but that's what Garrett Riley was hired to try to fix. But nonetheless, if you're a Clemson fan, you're like, all we've done is beat Florida State for forever. All of a sudden, now the coaches rank them ahead of us. What's that about? I think it's a fair question to answer. A fair question to ask. So this is what polls are fun for, right? I mean, we don't live in the BCS era anymore. These polls don't have a whole lot of tangible value. But in terms of looking at the kind of absent logic that drives a lot of the college football conversation, even among the supposed most educated folks within the sport, these preseason polls go a long way towards accentuating some of that. So keep that in mind there. We have a commitment date now for Chris Cole, 4-star linebacker out of the state of Virginia. He's getting ready to make his pledge and make his announcement. Our friends over at On3 and Hayes Fawcett, that's a really cool edit, by the way. You get the nice cold sort of winter motif, sort of looks like Hoth a little bit. September 10th. For Cole making his announcement there. So a little later than some of these guys are getting ready to go, and we'll see, what kind of spot Georgia's in come September 10th when Cole gets ready to make his announcement. Of course, Georgia won with a 4-star linebacker out of Virginia the other day, and now Cole set to make his announcement coming up on September 10th. So kind of keep that in mind there. Of course, the top 6 not only includes Georgia, but also Virginia Tech and USC and Miami and Tennessee and Penn State. So watch that as it relates to Chris Cole. And then finally, there was some chatter coming out of Baton Rouge yesterday about a fight taking place at LSU practice. Apparently, Harold Perkins kind of got mixed up in this. He was, I guess, kicked out of practice, something like that. Brian Kelly supposedly wasn't too happy about it. So let me read the story here, too. Supposedly a major fight today at LSU practice. I didn't see it, so I'm not ready to say what was major and what wasn't. Major is Tim Anderson from the White Sox getting knocked out at second base or whatever it was that happened in Montgomery, Alabama over the weekend. That's a major fight. I'm not quite so – I'd need to see the LSU fight to judge if it was a major fight or not. Guys involved, according to Recruits _CFB. Let me make sure I give them full credit. Harold Perkins and then Denver Harris, who transferred in from Texas A&M. So in a previous life, I used to go to NFL training camp a pretty good bit with the Falcons. They get in fights all the time. It's hot. Y'all, it's hot. Football players fight when it's hot. They just do. So, I mean, if you're Brian Kelly, maybe it's the wrong kind of fight. Maybe you don't like that. If guys have helmets on, I don't know there's anything that rises the level of major fight. Now, there's some video of this somewhere, then maybe I need to see it. Maybe we can judge if this is a major fight or not. I mean, in this day and age, if someone's not jumping off a riverboat and swimming to shore, I don't know that anything is going to be counted as a major fight anymore. But supposedly there was a major fight there at LSU. Generally speaking, I have a fairly high tolerance for training camp fights, fall camp fights. When it's hot and guys are doing drills and all they're doing is kind of like going up against their own teammates for weeks and darn near 2 months. There's going to be some bad moods. There's going to be some orneriness. I don't make too much of that, but I guess LSU got in a little bit of a fight yesterday. So there you go on that. We'll make that cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, here's something I know that you're not going to want to fight about. Here's something I think that's going to get you really excited, because there's a lot of really fun stuff coming up in the Atlanta area as we kind of roll through that fall time of year. Many of you who don't live like we do here in the Atlanta area are making your plans to come to Atlanta, including hopefully in December for the SEC Championship, but many of you before then there as well. So when you have events and things like that that bring you to Atlanta, and for a lot of you it's like cheerleading competitions, and there's just all kinds of stuff always going on in Atlanta, right? That just always is going on. Well, sometimes, either downtown's not a convenient place to stay, you just don't want to stay there for whatever reason, you want to be somewhere else. That's why I want you to keep my friends here in the Dunwoody area in mind. Discover Dunwoody, something you've probably heard me talk about here before. Our actual DawgNation World Headquarters studios are kind of right here in this sort of Dunwoody, Sandy Springs area, kind of right in between the Dunwoody MARTA station and the Sandy Springs MARTA station. And this area that we're kind of in is a really wonderful place for you to come and stay when you've got plans here in the Atlanta area, because both those MARTA stations give you a chance to be in Buckhead or downtown or midtown, wherever you want to be, very, very quickly and easily, perhaps from a cost standpoint even more efficiently and better than where you might be if you're staying somewhere else, having to deal with all kinds of other challenges that go along with that too. Plus, right here in the Dunwoody area there as well, there's also really great stuff there as well. Great restaurants, shopping opportunities there too. You got more than 2,100 different hotel rooms stretched across 9 different hotels around here. More than 200 restaurants, and that's like everything from like the kind of cool new kind of concept, farm to table, things like that. Or if you want, fine dining options, or if you just want something quick and enjoyable, quick service that tastes really good, you can kind of get that too. You want shopping experiences, there's all kinds of stores, more than 300 places you can shop there as well. So I want you to check this out online, discoverdunwoody.com/DawgNation. That's discoverdunwoody.com/DawgNation. And really find out, when you're thinking about Atlanta as a destination, Dunwoody is something you ought to discover in terms of where you want to stay to make that Atlanta trip so much more fun for you. Great access to all things going on in Atlanta through 2 different MARTA stations, restaurants, shopping, really fun, family-oriented place to stay right here in the Dunwoody area. Check them out online, discoverdunwoody.com/DawgNation for a lot more on that. So today is a very special day for one of our DawgNation folks here, and I want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due here on this. Today is our good friend Kaylee Mansell's birthday. Now, you want to talk about how it started, how it's going? Take a look at this here from Kaylee. The picture on the right, this is Kaylee just the other day participating in the great DawgNation Happy Hour with our friends at Marlowe's Tavern. And then going back all those years ago, how about the Georgia cheerleading outfit? How about Kaylee with the short hair? Still the same great smile. And so we wish Kaylee Mansell a happy birthday here today. And I'm certain I'll get all kinds of grief from her from showing the old picture. But I had a little help in putting that together. So a great look at Kaylee Mansell through the years, and a great part of our DawgNation team. So Kaylee, golden shoe to you, and a happy birthday to you indeed as you celebrate here today. And one of the things that Kaylee would love for me to say is those lousy, stinking Gators, Georgia back in Jacksonville coming up 81 days from right now. That is our Gator Hater Countdown. We will see all of you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust them on all of that. And, of course, happy birthday indeed to Kaylee Mansell. And really a cute picture of her going back all those years ago. And how many of us who are, parents have bought the little Georgia cheerleading outfit like that? I know my daughter's had one throughout the years, and kind of a fun thing to see. Very fun indeed. All right, we did not do a ton of comments yesterday because we were on remote, but we'll do more of those today. I can't stay forever because I got 8,000 things going on, but we'll do a few of those here today and try to make more of you here today. All right, let's see what else. G. Grace, Bama Boy predicting Florida to beat Utah on that Thursday night, week 1. We'll see about that. I don't quite know that's the case. I mean, ultimately for me, for all the attention that Graham Mertz gets as the Florida quarterback, and, frankly, unspectacular at best, I think the biggest issue for Florida is going to be there along its offensive line. I do not think this is a good Gators offensive line, and I think that is indeed a problem. Let's see what else. Jonathan, here on the subject of the Montgomery, Alabama fight with the Jim Ross call over top of it, that would certainly be something to see. Let's see what else. Thomas Tyson predicts that Florida's going to get pushed around. Yeah, I think they certainly up front they very well could. Aaron Dixon talking about the comparison between the two quarterbacks rising out there in Utah, Mertz here at Florida. Yeah, that's going to be a little bit of an issue for the Gators there as well. Matt Presley says, what are you hearing about fall camp so far? Quarterback and secondary. I guess it's still early days here right now. What I will tell you is you're about to hear a whole lot more because Saturday is the McGill scrimmage. And so that's going to be rumor mill galore. So you want to hear a bunch of stuff, you'll get to hear that Saturday because Saturday's the McGill scrimmage. So everybody's going to have all of that, DawgNation included, of course. That there's going to be 1,000 leaks that come out of there on that. And if you want your first big update on what's going on at quarterback, that'll be the easiest thing to get because you'll see it with your own eyes. You will see, if you're there anyway, you will see, those third down periods, things like that, where, quarterbacks will have to step up and make throws. And we'll see who does, we'll see who doesn't. As far as the secondary stuff goes, this is one of those things where I think some of that is probably best, left to like the leaks from practice. I've said before, good news always leaks, bad news never does. So, some of that's going to be a little bit more difficult to come by because a lot of that actually requires an evaluation. It's like quarterback results kind of tell part of the story. Is the pass completed? Is it not? There's a certain story to be told from the results themselves. Some of the other stuff when it comes to how so-and-so is playing at the cornerback spot, at a defensive secondary spot, part of that requires an actual evaluation to sort of make that determination on. So I don't know that the McGill leaks will tell you as much about the secondary. Now, if somebody makes one of these sort of dazzling plays, I'm sure we'll hear plenty about that. But my guess is we'll probably get more new news about quarterbacks sooner than we'll get news on anything else. Also, I know there's been some online chatter about, maybe some more injury setbacks stuff for Kendall Milton, things like that. I guess we're still sort of waiting to see on the severity of some of that kind of stuff there, too. Jerry Dogfan says, do you think that Beck's going to lose the starting job because of a lack of mobility, or does UGA have the skilled players and offensive line to overcome that? Yeah, I mean, obviously mobility is valuable, but to me, I think the mobility kind of comes into value in terms of all things being equal, you'd want the more mobile quarterback. But all things being equal is a very operative phrase there, just from the standpoint that if you gave me the most mobile quarterback in the world and the best passing quarterback in the world, I'm going to take the best passing quarterback. That ultimately, for all we want to say about mobility and things like that, and we have heard guests on our show bring up the mobility, the ability to throw the ball well is still going to be the determining factor in who wins the quarterback job. That's still going to be the thing that matters most of all. So let's just create kind of a hypothetical scenario in our mind. If Brock Vandagriff is the better athlete, but if Carson Beck is the better passer, the ability to deliver the ball in the air will be the deciding factor in the quarterback situation. It will. Now you'll say, what about Stetson Bennett and JT Daniels? Wasn't Stetson's mobility the deciding factor there? I think part of that is what we were told was true. Ultimately, I think the thing that cost JT Daniels the job here at Georgia, and listen, no one wanted to say this at the time, they just couldn't trust that he'd be healthy. I mean, and, I don't think they wanted to put him out there like that, as you might expect a team to kind of, somewhat be protective of one of its players. But, y'all, I mean, the writing's on the wall. They could not trust JT Daniels to be healthy. And so they had to look at another option. Stetson Bennett legitimately was more mobile than JT Daniels, but once they found out he could also make, listen, when it mattered, Stetson Bennett made the throws in a very big way there. But while we were told it was his mobility that gave him the nod over JT Daniels, it was Daniels. I mean, I don't even want to trash him now, but, look, there was a bell to be answered, and JT didn't always answer it. And so, Georgia had to move on, and that's kind of what they did. Christopher Vale says Beck may also look a little slower, but he actually moves around better than maybe the typical pocket passer. I think that's probably true. I mean, I don't think that Beck is what you would think of as He's certainly not a what I would think of as a dual threat quarterback, and I don't even know that I would put him in the category of mobile quarterback, but he certainly doesn't have negative mobility either, the best that I can tell. Memphis Dog says that Stetson was incredibly durable, and durable is a really good word. Durable is a really, really good word. Kirby Smart used the word durable the other day when he was talking about the running back situation. Like, durable is a word that matters in football. And, Stetson just sort of had that. Curtis Williams says that Bex also looks like he kind of bulked up a little bit. Yeah, I don't know if it's just the new haircut or what, but I thought that Carson looked good the other day. Photos that I saw him, I thought he looked good. I did. I did. Let's see what else. UGA Boy for Life Brunetti says, I personally think there isn't a race to be the starting quarterback, but Kirby's a smart guy, and if Carson goes down, we don't lose a beat. We want all of them ready. Yeah, I said this going back to early summer, that if you assume that Carson's the starter, and I think that conventional wisdom would certainly suggest that you probably should, the battle for Brock Vandegrift, if you believe he's ahead of Gunnar Stockton right now because he's a little bit more experienced, the battle for Brock to sort of keep some distance between himself and Gunnar Stockton is really important here, because backup quarterbacks have played a massive role in this league for quite some time. This is just a tough physical league. Quarterbacks get kind of beaten on every now and then. And so the battle to be not just the Georgia's second-string quarterback, the number 2 quarterback, but also a capable backup, that's a really important thing right now, a really important thing. Richard D. is asking about Peyton Woodyard. I guess the deal on Woodyard is that there was some social media stuff the other day where it's like maybe, whether it's showing a little less love to Georgia or outright taking some of the Georgia stuff off. At this point in time, you know how I think a lot of recruiting observers had sort of gotten to the point where they would say that, hey, the presence of gear, so-and-so wearing a Georgia shirt doesn't necessarily mean something. That oftentimes can be a false positive. I think at this point in time, I'm also ready to kind of not put a whole lot of stock into removing, stuff from social media, things like that, because I think a lot of times that kind of turns into a false positive thing too. But I believe, Richard, the issue there on the Woodyard deal may be the social media behavior, not exactly just screaming UGA as of late. Let's see what else. AJ Ferraro says that Beck scrambled against South Carolina in a way that would make me think he could get the job done if need be. So, yeah, there you go on that. Maybe that's the case, AJ, for sure. We have a surprise guest here. How about this? The birthday girl herself, I believe, is joining us. Kaylee Mansell, happy birthday. And what do you think about the blast from the past here, how it started, how it's going? Going way back to the past. I'm assuming you've seen the picture. I'm sure you probably even know it well. How old were you in this picture here on our left?
Well, first off, I just wanted to say thank you for the birthday shout-out. That means a lot. Number 2, I don't know how old I was in that picture, maybe 3 or 4. I will say it depicted some things about my future and not others. Number 1, obviously, it showed I was going to be a damn good dog for a long time.
Sure.
Number 2, I never ended up becoming a cheerleader. I used to get in trouble at gymnastics for throwing, like, the foam blocks at other kids, so they put me in softball real fast. But I will say, you could have used a better picture than the one where it looked like I was going to grow up to be a handsome young man, Brandon. That haircut, I don't know if my mom loves me then yet, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all of DawgNation. It's my Jordan year, so there's a lot of things in store, I hope.
So I'm sure you can guess I had a little help with that little picture there and a little bit of intel knowing it was your birthday here. Any kind of big birthday celebration plans on tap? Now, maybe you might not want to reveal all of this, but any birthday celebration plans you want us to be aware of for you here?
All I wanted for my birthday tonight was a good steak. So I'm going to House Steakhouse tonight. Might have a little espresso martini, but now that I'm an adult, I have responsibilities, and I got to be up and early for DawgNation Daily tomorrow morning, and I want to be able to present you with my best self. So we're keeping the birthday plans responsible for today, but that's not to say I won't celebrate accordingly later on.
So an espresso martini, it's a great way to be sort of chilled out and wired at the same time. That's kind of a nice thing there, right?
Yeah, but I'm more so excited. Like, I'm not a present person. I always tell people, give me something I can eat.
I like that there as well. Kaylee, good stuff. And thank you for being here tomorrow. Looking forward to seeing you back in studio again, of course, on Thursday for our next iteration of Marlowe's Tavern Happy Hour. We're looking forward to that there as well. And I do truly say this sincerely. Happy birthday. I hope it's a great celebration. Enjoy a good meal and a good time here. And then eventually the kind of celebration in which as you said, in your Jordan year of life, a kind of celebration befitting all of that.
All right, thank you, BA. Now I'm going to give Michael a 5-second gap so that way I don't hit the dial tone on him.
There you go.
My birthday present to him.
There you go. As someone who understands the other side of the glass, that's exactly how that operates. Good stuff from Kaylee Mansell. We love having her as a part of the team, and certainly hope she has a very, very happy birthday here today. Anything else on DawgNation.com for a minute? We're going to pop. I guess I never know on DawgNation.com who's the real thing and who's not, because we don't exactly have we don't exactly have to have his photo ID to get the the chat name over there. But I guess this really is Kaylee, because she says, why did I have to use the picture where I look like I was going to grow up to be a handsome young man? Hey, listen, hairstyles are what they are. Back in the day, people have, whatever hairstyle, so you can't hold that against you necessarily. All right, let me go over to Facebook here for a moment and see what those folks are doing, and we'll keep the conversation going here today. R.S. Andrews cool down. Kaylee, by the way, on a more serious note, is also going to be a part of day 2 of our kickoff luncheon for our Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic up in Rome. I'm actually going to be a part of those games next Friday night. Great doubleheader in Rome. There's actually 3 games on Friday, 2 of those in Rome. I'll be doing both of those. And one of those is going to involve the Cass Colonels and Georgia wide receiver commit Scovey White. So Rome's got a ton of players. Creekside's got a ton of players. So that's going to be a really, really fun thing next Friday. And Kaylee's actually up in Rome for that today. Let's see what else. Sandy Price says, here's a recruiting update for you. You either want to be a dog or you don't. It's 5-star. Go Dogs, hashtag go for 3 and 23. I love it, Sandy. And listen, I certainly believe that Georgia is the kind of place where I do think it allows players to sort of make a pre-decision about if Georgia's the right fit for them or not. I believe that is absolutely true. I also believe it's one of those things where, allowing guys to kind of work through their recruiting process, I also think makes some sense there as well. And I'm not saying Sandy's doing this, but I do think we've seen some people do this, where it's like the moment KJ made the decision that he made on Saturday, I think a lot of Georgia fans, boom, are ready to turn just like that, because, I think it's kind of easy to take some of that sort of stuff sort of personal. But I don't think Georgia fans who want to observe recruiting should do that. You hear me say this probably hopefully a good bit. I think you've got to have very thick skin when it comes to the recruiting process, and I don't think it's wise to get your feelings hurt very easily. And ultimately what Sandy says is absolutely true. Georgia's going to be the place for people who think they can fit in here at UGA, and there's a standard here that makes that not always super easy. But that standard also requires great athleticism there as well. I've said before that the Kirby doctrine in my mind is take talented players, make them tougher, and develop them to be better players. You got to have both aspects of that. A talented player alone is not enough, because they've got to be refined and finished products based on their time here at UGA. But on the flip side of that, there's the old adage in coaching of, hey, give me 11 guys who want to be here and who want to fight and play, and I'll go out and battle the most talented players in the world. You've heard the phrase before that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. There's an element of that that's true, but what Georgia would say is, hey, if you want to create an anti-fragile program, if you want to really bulletproof yourself, find talented players who also want to work hard there as well. So is Georgia going to be a little bit patient with guys like KJ Bolden because of the talent they possess? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And will Bolden get another chance to kind of rethink this decision because of the talent he can provide at UGA? Yes, he will. Could Georgia still be fine without KJ Bolden? Absolutely. We know that to be the case. Does Georgia want to find that out? No, we wouldn't rather find out what's life like is with KJ Bolden as opposed to without KJ Bolden. So that's just the nature of it, which is, hey, Georgia's going to go to battle with the guys who will ultimately want to be at Georgia, but that's not the same thing as saying that Georgia doesn't want the very best and most talented players it can get. And for the class of 2024, KJ Bolden is clearly one of those. A couple more. Scotty Barnes says, I don't get mad at the ones who choose another school, but I do want those that love being a dog. Yeah, and I think that Scotty's also bringing up a good point, too, that, listen, there's a part of me that's just sort of corny and sentimental, right? I mean, that's just kind of the way I am. So when you kind of run across one of these recruits that like really wants to be at Georgia, I mean, just like really wants to be at Georgia, I love that. I mean, that works on me so much. Some of these guys are probably putting it on a little bit. It still works, right? I mean, there's an element of if that's your gimmick, it's a pretty good gimmick to have. Like, there's nothing I love more about a Georgia football player than the love he has for being a Georgia football player. That just means something to me. So, as Scotty says, it's always going to be fun to root for those guys who just believe something in their soul about being at Georgia. That's always going to be really fun. But you know what? Give me a nucleus of those dudes and then a small handful of guys who maybe are at Georgia for a more transactional reason because it's the place that best prepares them for the future they want to have. I can deal with that, right? I mean, I can. I mean, it's just a fact of life when it comes to football. You got a roster of 85 scholarship players. You need about 70, 75 of those guys to be, kind of on a team for the right reasons. And you have about 5 or 10 that are just sort of here because they just sort of feel like that's the best business decision for them. But if they're talented enough, that talent comes in pretty handy from time to time there as well. And that is just kind of what life is. Brandon Griffin says, if we win a third national title and we have 12 players drafted and Florida State goes 7-5, I can guarantee you Bolden will be rethinking his decision. He quite possibly could. That may be the case. I also think this, and I think I said this on the show yesterday. If you're on like social media or message boards, things like that, you've heard some exorbitant figures thrown around about Bolden potentially going to Florida State. And I've been led to believe that some of those figures are likely probably true, that the actual overall total may be as crazy and outsized as you think that it might be. And here's what this leads me to say. And listen, I'm not mad at KJ for getting the money if that's what he's going to get or anybody else. I'm not mad at that necessarily, but it does concern me in one respect. That if I had a son who was going to be a kind of player in a sort of recruiting battle between Georgia and Florida State, which I'm very likely not to have, but nonetheless, if I did, if so-and-so school offered him $500,000, $500,000, something like that. Now, to you and me, that's a lot of money. But for someone who has a chance at a NFL future, that all of a sudden does not feel like quite as large of a sum of money. If we're talking about $500,000 here, I would tell a player, I think you might want to make a decision about who's going to best prepare you for the NFL, because the money you're going to make in the NFL can be a larger sum than that, and it can come for a longer period of time than that. Make a wise, long-range decision. But, y'all, I got to be honest about something for a second. If so-and-so player was being offered like a 7-figure sum of money, I mean, there's a point at which the NIL money, if it's real and it can be actually substantiated, there's a point in which the NIL figure might be so high. At a certain point, if you're the dad or if you're the close advisor or whatever else, the hanger-on, the street agent, like if you're one of those things, you might say to the player, and it might be good advice, if they're going to give you this much money, who cares if you go to the NFL or not? Because, I mean, you look what the average, sort of career earnings for the average NFL player is. It's actually not nearly as maybe as high as you might think it is. It ain't everybody being paid like Pat Mahomes, in other words. The actual average career earnings for the average NFL player is not maybe quite as high as you think it is. So if some of these NIL figures that we sometimes hear thrown around are real, if the father of that player, your best advice might be get that money now, and who cares if you go to the NFL? Like, you've already got the kind of payday that people used to go to the NFL as a way to try to get. And that's kind of a scary thing for football, because I think you want competition and playing well to matter. And one of the things that sort of scares me about the future of football, not that I'm anti-NIL or even anti-change. I hope I'm not anyway, because that's probably not a very healthy place to be. But there is a degree to which sort of front-end compensation could kind of render some of the competition a little less meaningful if some of these figures are indeed real. Wayne Kirkland says, if I was offered 7 digits, I'd be saying welcome to, as he says, the lousy, stinking Gator Nation Daily. I mean, I hopefully wouldn't do it for $1 million, but I'm not saying there isn't a multiple of $1 million I wouldn't at least consider doing it for, and I have to be honest about that. How about this from Sandy Price? He says, to go back to one more time. Yeah, hopefully not for $1 million. But for some sort of multiple of that, I don't know. As Ted DiBiase once said, everybody's got a price, I guess. So Sandy Price says something interesting. I didn't know this. He says, "Tell everyone that I was Roquan Smith's bus driver here in Macon County in Montezuma, Georgia." You know, you talk about a cool backstory there on that. Sandy Price was Roquan Smith's bus driver. That's really cool. And by the way, Roquan's a great story going back to that time in Montezuma in terms of some of the hard work he was a part of. That's really good stuff. Joseph Kennedy says NIL is like winning the Mega Millions. I mean, if some of this stuff is real, now part of the reason why I'm quite confident that Georgia eventually gets back into the KJ Bolden recruitment, whether it ultimately wins this battle or not, part of the reason I'm kind of confident about that is because, like, let's say that I don't know, let's say that I wanted to get some big-time player. I'm going to use all the resources that DawgNation Daily has to provide for me. And so I go to that player and I say, I'm going to give you $3 million. Well, of course, that player's going to say, well, if you're giving me $3 million, I'm more than happy to say yes to whatever you want to say. I'll come on your show every week. I'll endorse your show. I'll go to Georgia if you want me to. If this is a theoretical conversation, but if I said $3 million, of course that guy's going to say yes. Most people would. But then I've got to go out and get $3 million or $5 million or $2 million or $2.5 million, whatever figure you hear thrown around. I have now got to go out and get that money. And what we see sometimes in NIL is that part's not quite as easy as it appears to be. It's one thing to say, and we saw this, by the way, with Colorado, right? I mean, we have an actual proof of concept of this. Colorado hired Deion Sanders as its football coach, gave him huge dollars, more than they were used to paying for a coach. The athletic director in the press conference announced Deion Sanders. He was basically asked, how'd you get this money? And he said, we don't have it yet, but we're not worried about raising it. There's a lot of that goes on in NIL of, well, we don't exactly have it yet, but you know what? We feel like we can go out and get it because this guy's worth it. We're going to take this to our folks. So at some point in time, if there was some sort of exorbitant figure thrown around, at least some sort of down payment's going to be due on that, and we'll see how that's going. All right, let me go back around to the other comment sections. We'll get ready to bounce.
Hey, Brandon, I don't know if you could see this because of your cell reception in yesterday being remotely, but you got a lot of compliments for looking so sharp.
Oh, I appreciate that.
On your remote. So,
look at that.
Saw this on social media somewhere.
Oh, that's really nice, Michael. That's really good. That's really funny. That's really good. That's not too bad. Pretty funny stuff there. Pretty funny indeed. I don't know if that's the best picture to validate that as a point of view necessarily, but really pretty funny. Well done indeed. The most handsome reporter in the SEC. If only that were the case, I might have a lot bit more NIL dollars to throw around here. So pretty funny stuff. Pretty funny indeed. Let's see what else. BA's Ty Stone Cold Style says, where are they going to put the statue? I don't know. I think Georgia needs a lot more statues than it has. I do. I think that's probably true. Foster Moss said, I was sweating like Richard Nixon yesterday. Yeah, so you couldn't tell this because of where I was standing, but there's all kinds of stuff going on in a hotel lobby, and honestly, the least glamorous part of this job, which is very unglamorous 99% of the time, but the least glamorous part of the job is when you go on a remote situation like this, you have to sort of figure out where to do a show from. You have to look around, and you're kind of trying to judge it of where can I go that people aren't going to be in the way. Because other people got stuff that they have other events going on in this hotel lobby in addition to the luncheon. So I'm trying to find a place to be. So I go find kind of and by the way, some of these hotel lobby type things too, they're also darker than a dungeon. And so you try to find a little natural light. And I brought some lights. You can't do the show if it's too dark. So I'm always looking for a place that's got some light, a place that there's not a lot of people around, where it doesn't look like a mausoleum. I'm just always trying to find some sort of place to stand and do a show. I hate that part of the job, but it is a part of it. So you kind of find a spot near the kind of the front entrance of kind of the conference room area of this particular hotel. If you've ever been to a hotel, they all kind of look the same. And there's these big open windows. And these windows, the sun just shining right through this window. And, I am more dressed up than normal. And it's just hot. just hot as can be. So yeah. I was sweating a lot yesterday. If you got close enough, you could certainly see that. That is indeed the case. All right. Let's get a few more. We're going to get ready to go after that. Foster Moss says, I'm ready to see preseason Stickavius. Yeah, we should see that pretty soon, right? Bennett probably getting a lot of run for the Rams here coming up. Paul Moon says he's quietly hopeful for Nykar. I guess at this point I'm quietly hopeful that Georgia keeps Nykar, which I don't think they won't necessarily, but he was at Big Cat Weekend the other day. And I do think that he could be a very good wide receiver for these Dogs. D-Mart also mentioning Nitro Tuggle there as well. Jonathan Aaron says, I said I wouldn't do it for $1 million. He says, how much is Jimbo Fisher paying you? Listen, at this point in time, before I say something nice about Jimbo Fisher again, he's going to have to pay me a lot more than he has paid me. Let's see what else. What else is going on here before we get ready to go? Jerry Dogfan also mentioned Darnell Washington having a good start to his time there at the Pittsburgh Steelers. You'd love to see that. That's a good thing to be able to see. DMart42 also says Jimbo Fisher's good for the cash. Yeah, listen, that's about all he has right now. Joseph Kennedy says if I were to dye my hair and wear one of those Elvis robes, it'd look just like the Honky Tonk Man. Listen, I'll take that. I like the honky. I mean, I liked rooting against the Honky Tonk Man, but I've got good memories of the Honky Tonk Man era. I also wear a little bit of sideburn just because it keeps my face from looking so fat. Maybe some days better than others, but yeah. Daniel Otter says I got to try to find that best backdrop. Yeah. Lynn Shipman says like a lawyer. Keith Vold says, is there a statue of Herschel? No, not on campus, unfortunately. Not on campus. All right, one more final time here. Anything else? Yeah, we got to get ready to go for today. All right, thanks for being here. And funny stuff from Michael Carvell there a moment ago with the GQ magazine cover. That's very funny. You don't see me in suit and tie a lot, but you did yesterday, so that's pretty funny stuff. All right, so y'all check out RS Andrews online, RS Andrews for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs, showing up on time, doing the work that's promised, the price promised, including something I could have used more of yesterday, a little bit of air conditioning unit. Get that air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Find them online at rsandrews.com for more on that. Y'all have a great day. See you back here tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then.